Hey, Randy Hunter here from beginningsax.com. And now in this quick licks and tips video, I want to help clear up some of the confusion between half diminished and diminished chords. You know, I work with a lot of folks privately, and it seems like that I have some pretty good players that come in from time to time, and they're still not really certain of what the difference is between half diminished and diminished. If there's really a big difference, why does it matter? And you know, after all, they both have the word diminished in them. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we have good clarity on how these chords function and what the difference is between them. Now, let's start with the half diminished chord. The half diminished chord, now the half diminished symbol is the circle with a slash through it. So you may have seen chords with a circle with a slash between them, with a 7 beside them. That's and they may or may not even have the 7 beside them. But those are all half diminished chords, and half diminished is musical shorthand, jazz shorthand specifically, for minor 7 flat 5. So if you see a minor 7 flat 5 chord or a half diminished chord, they're exactly the same thing, just two different ways of writing the same thing. One of my favorite examples of showing the half diminished chord and the minor 7 flat 5 is Stella by Starlight. So if you have a real book, a Hal Leonard 6th edition of the real book, look up Stella by Starlight and you'll find that the first chord, and I'll speak in concert pitch, is E minor 7 flat 5. Now, I know a lot of you folks like to use the iReal Pro, so if you look up the same tune in iReal Pro, in concert pitch you'll find the first chord is E half diminished. Same exact thing. The chord, the arpeggio anyway, sounds like this. Now, the key to understanding the half diminished chord is to realize that it's a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Now, minor 7 chords typically function as two chords, specifically in 2-5-1s. And so that first chord change in Stella by Starlight is a 2-5-1, E minor 7 flat 5, or E half diminished to A 7 flat 9. Now, I may talk in tenor key moving forward, so that's F sharp half diminished to B 7 flat 9. So you might typically hear 2-5-1 patterns that are based on that minor 7 flat 5 or that half diminished chord. Now, that really gives you the half diminished chord in a nutshell, and I don't want to go through too many examples of how to use the chord and everything, and other songs that have the chord in it. I just want you to understand what the half diminished chord is, and to recall that it's the same thing as a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Now, let's talk about the diminished chord for a minute. The diminished chord is a little bit more complex, and let me play for you on tenor sax. I'll play the notes in a B diminished chord. And that's B, a minor third is D, a diminished fifth is F, and a diminished 7 is A flat. Now, the difference between the half diminished and the diminished is the half diminished has a minor third, a diminished fifth, and a minor 7. That minor 7 on the half diminished is the key note that makes it function as a 2 chord, because that has that guide tone pull to the dominant chord. Now, on the diminished chord, we don't have that minor 7. We've got a fully diminished 7. So, the function of the diminished chord, believe it or not, and this is going to seem strange because the diminished chord has a minor third in it, but the function of the diminished chord is as a rootless dominant chord. Now, notice I said rootless. That's the key thing, because we're not going to use a B diminished chord to function as a B7 chord. It will actually function most frequently as a G7 flat 9 chord, a dominant chord. Now, that's an important thing to know, because often in chord progressions like rhythm changes, and I'm going to change keys on you for a moment, rhythm changes, you'll find sometimes the diminished chord is the second chord in the progression. So there I played C major, C sharp diminished, D minor, G7. Excuse me. Now, that C sharp diminished chord in this case is functioning as an A7 chord. Now, there are a number of different dominant chords that the diminished chord can function as, so you have to kind of look at the surroundings to figure out how it's functioning in a particular tune. So we know that that rhythm changes has a chord progression often of 1, 6, 2, 5. So when we put that diminished chord in there, it's functioning as the 6th chord. Now the 6th chord is A7, and A7 happens to be 5 of the 2 chord, D minor 7. So our diminished chord in rhythm changes, our 2nd chord in the progression, C major, C diminished, or C sharp diminished, is functioning as A7, which is 5 of D minor. Now, how is it functioning as A7? Well, let's think about it. A7 flat 9, I should say. The 3rd on A7 flat 9 is C sharp. The root on the C sharp diminished chord is C sharp. The 5th on A7 flat 9 is E. The 3rd on C sharp diminished is E. The 7 on A7 flat 9 is G, G natural. The flat 5, or the diminished 5th on C sharp diminished, is also G natural. Now let's go to the flat 9 on A7 flat 9. We find that that note is B flat, and the diminished 7 on C sharp diminished is B flat. So A7 flat 9, C sharp diminished. And often pianists will put the major 7 in a diminished chord, the C natural. You know, there are other notes that can be added as well. But so anyway, that's the big, in a nutshell, that's the big difference between half diminished chords and diminished chords. Half diminished chords function as 2 chords often in 2/5 progressions. In fact, it's rare that you'll find a half diminished or a minor 7 flat 5 chord that's not functioning as a 2 chord. I think there's a Wayne Shorter tune I'm familiar with that has some independently functioning half diminished chords. We're not going to go there now, but generally, when you find a half diminished chord, it's functioning as a 2 chord as part of a 2/5 or a minor 2/5-1, and a diminished chord, a fully diminished chord, is typically functioning as a dominant 7 flat 9. All right, so check these out and see if that helps with some clarity on these 2 chords. Now, I'd also like to take just a moment and invite you to check out my jazz improvisation lesson series at beginningsax.com. Let me give you some examples of some of these sounds. Here's a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio as part of a minor 2/5-1. So there I inverted it a few different ways. Now here's a diminished scale. So there I played down the G diminished scale, and I'm going to resolve this to a C major. So there is a B diminished arpeggio. And I'm going to play down the diminished scale that goes with that particular arpeggio or that particular diminished chord. So there's a few sounds for you.